So what happens when you use pointers with functions? And this program is designed to demonstrate one very useful scenario where pointers are very helpful. So we have a main function. I'll start describing the program from the main function. Inside that main function, I define an integer variable named balance, and I'm initializing it to the value 30. And then I display the value of this variable, and then I call this function named increase, and I'm passing it the value of this variable named balance. So this here is where the increase function is defined. I accept an integer variable as argument. I add the value 2 to it, and that's it. The function returns. And on the next line in main, I display the new value of balance, so to speak. But you might expect that this variable had the value of 30, and then I've added 2 to it, and now it should display the value 32, because this variable is named balance and this variable is also named balance. And the reality is that in C, variables are passed by the so-called value, which means that when I make this function call, the value of this variable named balance, which is 30, is copied into this variable named balance. And although they are named identically, this variable named balance is stored separately in memory for the main function. And this variable named balance is a completely separate memory location for this variable, for this function named increase. So these are completely different variables. And on this line, when the function is called, at that point, the value from this variable is copied into this one. They are not magically connected whatsoever beyond this point. So after that, when you add 2 to this variable, you are just incrementing the value of this variable by 2, not this variable named balance in main. So when you try to display the value of the variable named balance in main on the next line, you still see 30. These are completely separate variables. So what if I wanted the called function to be able to increment or increase the value of this variable in main function? In that case, I call a function which accepts a pointer as argument. So in this case, there's another function named increase pointer defined over here, and it accepts as argument a pointer to an integer. And you'll see on line 20 over here that I am passing the address of this balance variable. So rather than copying the value of balance, which is 30, into the argument, I am passing the address of this variable to that function. Here's the key to that location. You can go to that location and you can do whatever you want with it. Inside that function, what I do is I check the value of balance. Remember that this is now no longer 30. This is the address of that variable. It is the address where that 30 is stored. Now, and what I'm doing with this if statement is that I'm checking if the value of this variable balance is true. What do we mean by true? Well, in C, anything that is 0 is false, and anything that is not 0 is considered true. So if this pointer variable contained the value 0, or which is also called null, then we don't want to mess with that. We don't want to dereference that because that results in all sorts of errors. So that's why I am first checking if this variable balance does not contain 0. If that is so, then I can safely go ahead and dereference it. I can go to that address, and I can, since I'm looking at the left hand side, I can set that memory location, which is, remember, this variable named balance defined in main. I can go to that location and set it to a certain value. Set it to a certain value which is given on the right hand side, which adds to whatever is stored in that memory location. Since the value stored there is 30, I add 2 to it, make it 32, and store it back in the same location. So once this function returns, you do the cout statement, you should see a 32 on this line. So let's go ahead and compile this program and see if it indeed does that. Compiles is fine. I run it. And like I said, initially the value was 30. Then we called this function, passed the variable balances value by value, and we still saw 30. And then we passed this value by reference, or in other words, we passed the address of this variable, and that function was able to increase the value of this variable to 32. So passing the addresses of variables using pointer variables allows the called function to be able to modify the value of that variable, and that change is reflected in the calling function. That's a very important use case for pointer.